The last amber rays of sunset silhouetted Abigail O'Sullivan against the darkening horizon as she stared at the empty house that no longer felt like home. The note on the kitchen table had said only, "I can't do this anymore," the ink barely dry when she'd found it 3 days ago. 5 years of marriage to Thomas vanished like morning mist, leaving nothing but a few hastily packed bags and the deafening silence of abandonment. Montana Territory, 1878. Abigail had followed her husband west from Boston with dreams of building something together. Now, at 26, she stood alone on the porch of their modest homestead 10 miles outside of Willow Creek, wondering how long she could manage before the bank took everything. The first drops of rain began to fall as Abigail hugged herself against the chill. Their small cattle operation needed tending, the vegetable garden was overgrowing, and winter would arrive in mere months. She'd never felt more alone. "Madam, everything all right out here?" the deep voice startled her. A rider had approached without her noticing, his horse's hooves muffled by the soft earth. He sat tall in the saddle, hat pulled low against the increasing rain. "Just watching the storm come in," she lied, wiping quickly at her eyes. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes, though, were unexpectedly kind beneath the brim of his worn hat. "Samuel Kincaid," he introduced himself, extending a gloved hand. "Foreman at the R. Mr. Reynolds mentioned your husband rode through a few days back, heading east with packed bags. Thought I should check if you needed anything." Abigail swallowed hard, embarrassment and pride warring within her. So everyone already knew Thomas had abandoned her. Of course they did. News traveled faster than wildfire in these parts. "Abigail O'Sullivan," she replied, shaking his hand briefly. "And I'm perfectly fine, Mr. Kincaid, but I thank you for your concern." The skies opened then, rain pouring down in earnest. Without hesitation, Samuel grabbed his horse's reins and nodded toward the house. "Mind if we continue this conversation somewhere drier?" Inside, Abigail busied herself making coffee while Samuel stood awkwardly by the door, hat in hand, dripping onto her floor. The cabin was modest but neat, with handmade curtains and a few treasured books on a small shelf. "Your husband mentioned anything about when he'd return?" Samuel asked carefully. Abigail set the coffee pot on the stove with more force than necessary. "He didn't mention anything at all, Mr. Kincaid. Not when he'd be back, not if he'd be back." She turned to face him, chin lifted. "He left without a word." Samuel nodded slowly, understanding darkening his features. "I see. No need for pity," she added quickly. "I'll manage just fine." "I've no doubt about that, Mrs. O'Sullivan, but managing a homestead alone isn't easy for anyone." He accepted the cup of coffee she offered. "You have family nearby." "No family at all, not anymore." She sipped her coffee, the bitter warmth failing to dispel the chill that had settled in her bones since finding Thomas's note. "But I've always been resourceful." Samuel's gaze traveled to the window, where the rain now lashed against the glass. Beyond it, she knew, lay fields needing tending and cattle requiring care work for multiple hands, not just her own. "The R could use an extra cook," he said suddenly. "Mrs. Whitley's getting on in years, and the men complain about her biscuits something fierce." Abigail bristled. "I'm not looking for charity, Mr. Kincaid. It's not charity when you're earning your keep, and it would leave you time to maintain things here." His eyes met hers steadily. "Just until you decide what you want to do next." "And what makes you think I want to do anything other than stay right here?" Samuel smiled slightly. "Because staying put when you've been wronged takes more strength than running, and you don't strike me as someone who runs, Mrs. O'Sullivan." The rain continued through the night, and by morning, Abigail had made her decision. With few options and winter approaching, she agreed to cook at the R 3 days a week. Samuel arrived at dawn to escort her to the ranch, his quiet presence somehow reassuring against the gossip she knew would follow. The R sprawled across several thousand acres, the main house and bunkhouse forming a courtyard with the stables and cookhouse. Men milled about, eyeing her curiously as Samuel helped her down from her horse. Mrs. O'Sullivan will be taking over kitchen duties on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays," Samuel announced to the gathered cowhands. "You'll show her the same respect you'd show your own mothers, or you'll answer to me." The men nodded, some tipping their hats in greeting. Abigail straightened her back and followed Samuel to the cookhouse, where an elderly woman with iron gray hair kneaded dough with surprising vigor. "Mrs. Whitley, this is Mrs. O'Sullivan," Samuel said. "She'll be helping you starting today." The older woman looked Abigail up and down critically. "About time I got some help around here. These men eat like locusts," she gestured to a spare apron. "Hope you know how to make a decent stew. Their stomachs are as particular as their opinions." By midday, Abigail had proven herself more than capable in the kitchen. The ranch hands devoured her chicken and dumplings with appreciation, several returning for seconds. Mrs. Whitley nodded approvingly as she watched. "Not bad for a city girl," she commented, her tone softer than before. "Where'd you learn to cook like that?" "My grandmother," Abigail replied, washing dishes in the large sink. She believed a woman should know how to stretch ingredients during lean times. "Smart woman," Mrs. Whitley said, "and these are lean times indeed." Over the following weeks, Abigail fell into a rhythm. 3 days at the ranch, 4 days at her homestead, trying to maintain what she and Thomas had built. Samuel often rode out to check on her on his days off, helping with repairs to the barn roof or mending fences without being asked. "You don't have to keep doing this," she told him one evening as they sat on her porch, the setting sun painting the landscape gold. "I'm not your responsibility." "Never said you were," he replied, whittling a small piece of wood. "But neighbors help neighbors out here. It's how we all survive." "Is that what we are, neighbors?" She hadn't meant it to sound so challenging, but the question hung between them nonetheless. Samuel looked up, his knife pausing. "For now, I reckon that's the most appropriate word." One cool October morning, Abigail arrived at the Triple R to find the ranch in an uproar. Cattle had broken through a fence during the night, and all hands were out trying to round them up before they scattered too far. Mrs. Whitley was bedridden with a fever, leaving Abigail to handle the cooking alone. By dusk, the men returned, muddy and exhausted. Samuel was the last to arrive, his arm wrapped in a makeshift bandage, face pale beneath his tan. "What happened?" Abigail asked, rushing to meet him as he dismounted stiffly. Bull decided to express his displeasure at being herded, he grimaced. "Got me good before the boys could distract him." She helped him to the cookhouse, sitting him at the long table while she gathered clean cloths and water. The wound was deep, a gash along his forearm that still seeped blood. "This needs stitching," she said, cleaning it carefully. Samuel nodded, jaw tight. "Doc's out at the Miller place. Their boy came down with scarlet fever yesterday." "I can do it," Abigail offered. "My father was a doctor in Boston. I assisted him often enough." Samuel studied her face, then nodded. "I trust you." Those 3 simple words wrapped around Abigail's heart as she gathered what she needed. Trust was something she'd thought lost to her after Thomas's betrayal. Her hands remained steady as she stitched the wound, Samuel watching her work with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. When she finished, he caught her hand in his. "Thank you," he said softly. "You're full of surprises, Abigail O'Sullivan." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it lingered between them like an unspoken promise. The next morning, she found a small wooden carving on the cookhouse table, a delicate rose, perfectly detailed. Beside it lay a note. "A promise. I'll never leave without saying goodbye." It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. Every day thereafter, Samuel found ways to keep that first promise while adding new ones. Some came as notes left where only she would find them. Others he spoke quietly when they found moments alone. "I promise to always be honest with you, even when the truth is difficult. I promise to respect your independence, even as I offer my help. I promise to see you, Abigail, not just look at you, but truly see you." Each promise rebuilt something inside her that Thomas had broken. Not just trust, but the belief that she was worthy of such careful attention. November brought early snow and whispers that the bank might foreclose on Abigail's homestead. Thomas had, it seemed, taken out loans against the property that she hadn't known about. The news came via Mr. Peterson, the bank manager, who rode out personally one frigid morning. "I'm sorry, Mrs. O'Sullivan," he said, uncomfortably shifting in her kitchen chair, "but the payments haven't been made in 3 months." Mr. O'Sullivan assured us in August that he'd settle the account, but then he disappeared, Abigail finished flatly. "How much does he owe?" When Peterson named the sum, her heart sank. It might as well have been $1 million for all her ability to pay it. "You have until the end of December," Peterson said, rising to leave. "After that, I'm afraid the bank will have to take possession." Samuel found her later that day, sitting in the empty barn, red-eyed but composed. "Peterson told me," he said, settling beside her on a hay bale. "I'm sorry, Abigail. It wasn't even a good marriage," she said softly. "Did you know that? We argued constantly. He resented coming west, blamed me for insisting on the adventure. I thought things would improve once we had our own place, but—" She shook her head. "I just never thought he'd leave, not like that." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "Some men aren't meant for the responsibilities they take on." "And what sort of man are you, Samuel Kincaid?" she asked, turning to look at him directly. "The kind who keeps his promises," he answered, his voice low and certain. "Today's promise, I'll help you find a way to keep your home if that's what you want." He was true to his word. The next day, Samuel approached Mr. Reynolds, the Triple Articus owner, about purchasing some of Abigail's cattle at a fair price. Reynolds, a shrewd but fair businessman, agreed to look at her stock. By week's end, she had enough money to make a partial payment to the bank, buying herself more time. "It's not a permanent solution," Samuel cautioned as they counted the money at her kitchen table, "but it gives us time to figure something out." "Us?" Abigail asked, looking up from the neat stacks of bills. Samuel met her gaze steadily. "Yes, us, unless you'd rather face this alone." She shook her head slowly. "No, I wouldn't." As December's grip tightened on the land, Abigail began spending more time at the Triple R. A blizzard made travel between the ranch and her homestead dangerous, so Mr. Reynolds offered her a small room off the main house. The arrangement was meant to be temporary, but as days stretched into weeks, she found herself increasingly considering the ranch as home. Samuel continued his promises, now delivered every morning with fresh coffee before the rest of the ranch stirred. "I promise to always make sure you have warm coffee on cold mornings. I promise to listen to your dreams as carefully as I listen to your words. I promise to stand beside you, not in front of you." Each promise was simple yet profound, building a foundation of trust between them that grew stronger with each passing day. On Christmas Eve, the ranch hands gathered in the main house for a celebration. Mrs. Whitley, recovered from her illness, had outdone herself with the feast, and Abigail had contributed pies made from preserved summer berries. The atmosphere was festive, with a small decorated pine tree in the corner and candles glowing in each window. Samuel found Abigail by the fireplace, watching the celebrations with a soft smile. He held out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Merry Christmas," he said quietly. Inside was a delicately carved wooden box, its lid depicting her homestead in exquisite detail. She traced the tiny porch where they'd sat so many evenings, the barn where he'd found her crying, the fields they'd walked together. "It's beautiful," she whispered, opening it to find a folded paper inside. The note contained a single line. "I promise to love you for as long as you'll let me." Abigail's eyes filled with tears as she looked up at him. "Samuel, you don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know it's too soon. I know your heart is still healing, but I wanted you to know the truth of how I feel." Before she could respond, a commotion at the door drew everyone's attention. Mr. Peterson had arrived, red-faced and stamping snow from his boots. "Mrs. O'Sullivan," he called, spotting her by the fire. "I have news that couldn't wait." The room fell silent as Peterson crossed to her, handing over an official-looking document. "Your husband has been located in Chicago," he said. "He signed over the deed to the homestead to you completely and settled the outstanding debt with the bank." Whispers erupted around the room as Abigail stared at the document in disbelief. "Why would he do this?" she asked faintly. Peterson shifted uncomfortably. It seems Mr. O'Sullivan has remarried. His new father-in-law insisted he settle his previous obligations properly. The news should have hurt, Abigail thought distantly, yet all she felt was a strange relief. Thomas had truly moved on, and in doing so had freed her as well. She looked up to find Samuel watching her carefully, his expression guarded. Without a word, she crossed the room to him, taking his hand in hers. "I have a promise for you," she said softly, for his ears alone. "I promise to trust this feeling between us wherever it might lead." His smile was like sunrise after the longest night. The new year brought changes to Willow Creek. With her homestead secure, Abigail made the decision to sell it to a young family newly arrived from Pennsylvania. The proceeds allowed her to invest in a small storefront in town, where she opened a bakery that quickly became popular with locals and travelers alike. Samuel continued as foreman at the R, but spent his free time helping Abigail establish her business. Their courtship progressed steadily, his daily promises continuing without fail. "I promise to celebrate your victories as if they were my own. I promise to never take for granted the gift of your company. I promise that my heart belongs only to you today and all my tomorrows." By spring, their relationship was the subject of approving nods and knowing smiles throughout the community. Abigail found herself welcomed not as poor Mrs. O'Sullivan, abandoned by that no-good husband, but as a respected businesswoman and Samuel Kincaid's sweetheart. On a warm evening in May, Samuel took Abigail riding to a hilltop overlooking the valley. Wildflowers carpeted the ground in purple and yellow, and the setting sun painted the distant mountains gold. He spread a blanket beneath an old oak tree and produced a picnic from his saddlebags. "I have something to ask you," he said as they watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "But first, today's promise." He took her hand, his expression solemn. "I promise that if you give me the honor of being your husband, I will spend every day trying to deserve it. I promise to be faithful, supportive, and true. I promise to build a life with you that neither of us could imagine alone." From his pocket, he withdrew a simple gold band. "Abigail O'Sullivan, will you marry me?" Tears sparkled in her eyes as she cupped his face in her hands. "Yes," she whispered. "With all my heart, yes." Their wedding took place in July, a celebration that brought together the entire community. The Triple Articus pastures were transformed with tables and lanterns, flowers and ribbons creating a festive atmosphere. Abigail wore a dress of cream-colored silk, her hair adorned with wildflowers. Samuel, usually seen in dusty work clothes, looked transformed in his dark suit, his eyes never leaving his bride throughout the ceremony. Mrs. Whitley outdid herself with the wedding feast, assisted by a team of women from town who were determined that this would be a day to remember. Mr. Reynolds gave the bride away, having become something of a father figure to Abigail over the past year. As dusk fell and lanterns were lit, Samuel led Abigail in their first dance as husband and wife. "Have I told you today's promise?" he murmured against her hair. "Not yet," she smiled up at him. "What is it?" "I promise that this is only the beginning of our story, Mrs. Kincaid." He twirled her gently as the fiddle played. "The best chapters are still to come." Samuel kept that promise too. Their first year of marriage brought prosperity as Abigail's bakery thrived, and Samuel was promoted to ranch manager, when Mr. Reynolds decided to spend winters in California for his health. They purchased a small house in town, perfectly situated between the bakery and the ranch, creating a home that combined both their influences. Their happiness seemed complete when, in the spring of their second year together, Abigail discovered she was expecting. Samuel's joy knew no bounds. His promises now included pledges to their unborn child. "I promise to teach our child about honor and kindness," he would say, his hand resting on Abigail's growing belly. "I promise to show them how to respect the land and the people who share it." Emma Grace Kincaid arrived on a stormy November night, her lusty cries announcing her presence to the world. Samuel paced outside their bedroom as the doctor and midwife attended Abigail, his face lined with worry until he finally heard his daughter's voice. "She's perfect," Abigail told him when he was finally allowed inside, her exhausted face glowing with love as she cradled their tiny daughter. "She has your eyes." Samuel sat carefully on the edge of the bed, gently touching Emma's tiny fist with one finger. When she instinctively grasped it, his eyes filled with tears. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your father, and I have a promise for you too. I promise that you will always know how deeply you are loved." As Emma grew from infant to toddler, Samuel's daily promises continued, now often shared over breakfast with both his wife and daughter. Abigail saved each one, recording them in a journal that chronicled their life together. Some were profound, others practical, but all were delivered with the same unwavering sincerity. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Samuel surprised Abigail by taking her back to the hilltop where he had proposed. Emma, now 3 years old, ran ahead of them, chasing butterflies through the wildflowers. "Do you remember what I promised you here?" Samuel asked, his arm around Abigail's waist as they watched their daughter. "That it was only the beginning of our story," she replied, leaning into him. "You were right. I have today's promise," he said, turning her to face him. "I promise that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, if we're lucky enough to have that time, I'll still be finding new reasons to love you every day." Abigail's heart swelled with happiness. "I believe you," she said, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "You've never broken a promise yet." Samuel's hands settled on her waist, his smile gentle. "And I never will." As dusk approached, they called Emma back to the blanket, where the family shared a picnic dinner before heading home. The little girl, tired from her adventures, fell asleep against her father's chest as they rode. "She has your spirit," Samuel said softly, careful not to wake her, "brave and determined. And your kindness," Abigail added, watching them with love, "your steady heart." Their home welcomed them as darkness fell, the lamp in the window left burning by Mrs. Peterson, who had watched their older son, 2-year-old James, for the day. After settling the children in their beds, Abigail found Samuel on the porch, gazing up at the star-filled sky. "A penny for your thoughts," she said, joining him on the swing. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I was thinking about the day we met, you standing on your porch in the rain, pretending you weren't crying. I was so angry," she remembered. "Not just at Thomas, but at myself for following him west, for believing in promises he never intended to keep." "And now?" Samuel asked, his voice gentle. Abigail turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the love that had grown between them over the years. "Now I'm grateful for every step of the journey, even the painful parts, because they led me to you, to us." Samuel traced her cheek with his fingertips. "I have one more promise for today. Just one," she teased. "Usually there are several by bedtime." His smile deepened. "I promise that for every day we have together, I will give you a reason to believe that true love exists. Not in fairy tales or novels, but right here, between two people who choose each other every morning and every night." Abigail leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "I love you, Samuel Kincaid." "And I love you, Abigail Kincaid, today, tomorrow, and all the days after." Their life together continued to unfold in a tapestry of ordinary days made extraordinary by their devotion to each other. The bakery expanded to include a small cafe that became the heart of Willow Creek's social life. Samuel eventually purchased a share in the Triple R when Mr. Reynolds decided to retire fully, securing their future in the community they both loved. As the years passed, they faced challenges together: drought seasons that threatened the ranch, an illness that nearly took young James from them, the economic uncertainties that periodically swept the territory. Through it all, Samuel's promises remained a constant, a daily reminder of the foundation they had built. Emma grew into a confident young woman with her mother's talent for business and her father's affinity for horses. James developed a fascination with medicine, eventually leaving for school in Denver with plans to return as Willow Creek's doctor. Their youngest, Sarah, born 10 years after their wedding, inherited Abigail's artistic nature and Samuel's patient disposition. On their 20th anniversary, with their children grown or nearly so, Samuel and Abigail returned once more to their hilltop. The oak tree had grown broader, its shade more generous, but the view remained as breathtaking as ever. 20 years of promises, Abigail mused, her hand in his as they sat beneath the tree. Have you ever struggled to think of a new one? Samuel shook his head, the silver now threading through his dark hair catching the sunlight. Never. There are infinite ways to say I love you, Abigail. I'll never run out. She rested her head on his shoulder, content in the knowledge that what they had built together was rare and precious. They had faced the hardships of frontier life not just with resilience, but with joy, finding beauty in the struggle and strength in each other. What's today's promise? She asked, as she had thousands of times before. Samuel smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way she had always loved. I promise to remind you, whenever you need to hear it, that the day you let me into your life was the day mine truly began. Abigail's heart filled with the same warmth she had felt on that Christmas Eve so many years ago when he had first confessed his love. I'm glad Thomas left, she admitted softly. I would never have known what real love could be if he hadn't. Then I owe the man a debt, Samuel replied, though I still think leaving without a word was the coward's way. It led me to you, she said simply, to your promises every day. As the sun began its descent, painting the valley in gold just as it had on the day of his proposal, they sat in comfortable silence. Two people who had grown together rather than apart through the years. Their story, begun in abandonment and hesitant trust, had transformed into one of enduring love and unwavering commitment. That night, as they prepared for bed in the home they had filled with memories, Samuel took Abigail's hands in his. I have one last promise for today, he said, his voice soft in the lamplight. I'm listening, she replied, her eyes still bright with love after all their years together. I promise that when we are old and gray, when our adventures have slowed and our grandchildren fill this house with noise and laughter, I will still look at you the way I did the first time I saw you, as the most remarkable woman I've ever known. Abigail's smile held all the warmth of their shared lifetime. That's a promise I know you'll keep, Samuel Kincaid, you always do. And as they had every night for 20 years, they fell asleep in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, and without fail, a new promise to cherish.